Well, hey there, guys. I'm Axel the Beast, and this is the Curiosity Shop, the ZeldaDungeon.net video mailbag where I answer your Zelda questions. And just real quick before we get started, once again, there's a mailbag intro contest going on. Check out the information on it in the description, and yeah, just got a few more weeks on it. Alright, Link's Inventory asks, in Skyward Sword the Boomerang was replaced with the Beetle, but I liked Boomerang better because it's used for both combat and puzzles, compared to the Beetle, which is only used for puzzles. I thought the Boomerang was great in Wind Waker because you could stun strong enemies and kill weak ones. Which would you rather see in a newer game? I actually have no preference between these two. I mean, tell me your guys' favorite, but like, the Boomerang is the classic item, but I don't think classic items always need to reappear. I think that's like, that's not a really important thing, and I think the series could experiment more with its items. It's true that the Beetle was intended as a replacement of the Boomerang or a similar concept with the motion controls, but I never really looked at it that way. I just saw it as a very different item. Very different item, because, it's a mechanized Beetle. But, there's similarities, but I think there's enough differences that I just didn't really look at them as the same. And I like that the Beetle was puzzle-centric. I don't think it needs to be. There's ways you could use it for combat if they were to expand on it in a future game. I honestly just like to see them experiment with items more, and I like both. I loved it in the Boomerang and the Wind Waker, like you said, but I think that they could do both and experiment with different items in future games. Ventus asks, what do you want to see out of the next incarnation of Zelda? How do you want her role and personality represented? Via the early Skyward Sword route of childhood friend, run-of-the-mill teenager personality, of the Twilight Princess's important but in very few scenes, or Spirit Track's childhood friend and tag-along companion? Or maybe a blend or something entirely different? Well, with Zelda, I think the main thing is, unlike in Twilight Princess and the Minish Cap, and I guess to a much lesser degree Ocarina of Time, I really would like Zelda to not, to actually have a major part in the game. This is what I liked about Spirit Tracks and Skyward Sword, because she was plot-centric all the time, as opposed to just not important. I mean, I don't mind that some games, don't have as much importance on her, but I would like to see a little more of games where she's important, because they're not as common anymore. Well, weren't as common for a while, I guess. They're starting to become common now. And Spirit Tracks is one of my favorites for this, but I don't think she necessarily even needs to be like a partner like that. Skyward Sword, I think, did well with that as well. So just more of her, because, it's the title series. You kind of would think you'd see a little more, or have a little more plot involvement, even if you don't really see her from Zelda, the title character, I mean, again, Legend of Zelda, it's based on the, there's a lot of things surrounding Zelda, but she doesn't always need to be the most focal character, but I would like to see more of that. The Wanderer asks, do you think Nintendo should occasionally experiment with different genres for full Zelda games? If so, which genres would you most like to see? Well, I don't really want them to change the genre for, the main Zelda games, or, full. I guess I don't know what you mean by full. The main series, I really do think that it's an adventure game. It started as an adventure game. That's where its strengths and core traits lie, and it shouldn't change. I don't like the idea of just taking series that have, defining traits, i.e. any series, and then changing it into another genre and just making it not the series at all. But, regarding side games, and I know I've said this a lot, this is probably, I've said this a lot recently, too, I think, but I think side games can experiment a lot, and as for, specific genres, I don't have too many specifics, but one main one that I kind of want to see is an MMO, RPG Zelda game. Basically, an online, persistent world with lots of characters who can pick different species from the Zelda series and go through dungeons in an open world, and maybe some quests and a Zelda plot in there, or several Zelda plots in there for different quests, but, and it would basically play like a 3D Zelda game, plus some RPG elements and stat growth. I think that would be a really interesting experience for a side game, just not the main series. Fig asks, what are you expecting to see on the Wii U as the days go by? What kind of Zelda do you think could be developed for the new system? Honestly, a lot of my expectations, I don't know what to think about the system at this point, because there's a lot of things they can do with it. It's compatible with the Wii Motion Plus and stuff, so they could easily do another Skyward Sword on it, but they have the Wii U gamepad, so there's a lot of options there, and it seems ideal for 4 swords, as I've discussed. So, I think, I kind of want to think that they'll be doing something similar to Skyward Sword, but perhaps with an option for, people who don't want to use motion controls. But also, I think that, a 4 swords multiplayer thing is very possible, other than Battle Quest. And I just think that the system offers a lot of different options for what they can do. So I don't really know what to expect exactly, because they could do just about anything, and you'd think that because they've set the console up so that they can, they probably will. A plus B asks, recently after beating or rebeating my Zelda and God of War games, I realized they share a lot of gameplay elements such as switch puzzles and using other NPCs to solve puzzles, dungeons, and story elements like finding a sacred power to defeat something stronger than you. I just want to know what you think about the similarities between the games, being that they have drastically different characters. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, I'm not an expert on God of War, and I can't like confirm or deny any of the similarities you stated, but you know, game design is kind of like, there's a lot of like standard things you want to do with it, and it's even more true for story design. And the Zelda series has never been particularly original on story themes it uses, and there are a lot of tropes and a lot of even design elements that are consistent between stories, so I'm not that surprised that they share similarities, or that any games share similarities. TikTok asks, how would you feel if a future Zelda game had a sadder ending, like if something were to happen to Link or one of his companions? If you would like a more bitter than sweet ending, how do you think it could be implemented properly without being too depressing? Would you ever want Nintendo to go as far as to make it obvious that a character flat out died? If they were going to do the death thing, it would probably have to start to get closer to the teen rating that Twilight Princess had. I don't know how exactly they could do it, or at least not in a way that I could describe in a short time on a mailbag question, but yeah, you know, they could do more bittersweet endings, and they kind of have. Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword both ended off on a sour note regarding the companions, at least. And so it's not like something they haven't done. They could capitalize on it, especially for one game. I don't think a sad tone is something the series should do in general, but for a game or two, sure. And there's definitely ways they could do it. Granted, again, teen rating if there was death, and of course you would have to run risk of having fans very upset at being, you know, you making them cry. There's that. Ben LJ964 asks, I really liked what Skyward Sword did with making alternate paths within the story or side quests, like giving the letter to the girl or the hand in the bathroom. How do you feel about making larger choices within the game? You know, I think that this is a good thing. I think that Skyward Sword did a good job with the alternate dialogue options, separate from what you're talking about. And I think that they could have bigger impacts like they did with the Skyward Sword, like with the side quest with Karain and the hand thing in the toilet. You know that. I think that this is something that the other future Zelda games could capitalize on and would be interesting. I don't think it necessarily needs to be there, but particularly with the dialogue options, I think it adds a lot of depth, and it would give the player more control and feel more involved with the world and the story progression, and especially with the characters and, you know, Link, that whole proxy Link to the player thing. So I think it's a good idea, definitely. Ansel22 asks, in Ocarina of Time, Link goes to the future because his spirit sleeps for 7 years. This means that it's not actually time travel, but merely waiting while time passes. So how does Link go back in time to become a kid again? Well, he does pretty much instantly wake up in the future, and as you said, he goes back in time. So the way I rationalize it, and I'm not the only timeline theorist, though I'm not really a timeline theorist, but I've heard timeline theorists describe it in the same way. It's the only way it really makes sense. Granted, there are still holes, and there's always holes with the time travel in that game. But basically the idea, I think, is that Link it's his spirit that travels through time. His body stays in the Temple of Time, and he replaces it, you know, like he takes a sword and he goes forward, his mind just zips forward to when he was an adult and he's pulled the sword. He put the sword back, his mind goes back to the moment just before he drew the sword. That's how I look at it. It's the only way that really makes sense. It is time travel, but it's weirder time travel, so yeah, there you go. The Servant asks, why, in your opinion, do you think the Bombers group are named the Bombers? Well, you know, there's just no explanation for this, but the most likely thing, at least in my opinion, like you asked, is that they thought it sounded cool. They're a bunch of little 10-year-old kids. There's not going to be a lot of thought put into their naming. Atticus asks, I'm a noob, and why is the Wind Waker on the adult timeline if Link is only 12 in that game? Sincerely, newbie Atticus. You know, this is a thing that really blows the minds of a lot of Zelda fans. It's simply that the adult timeline takes place after adult Link and his era from Ocarina of Time, whereas the child timeline is based on the events that were changed when child Link changed his, you know, history after being sent back in time. It's just simply, it branches off from adult Link or child Link, and that's the only reason for the names. It's hilarious that the first games on each timeline, for the most part, borrowing Majora's Mask featured the opposite age of their title, but yeah, that's how it is. It's weird. NachoMan11 asks, why is it that the Skyview Temple is the Skyview Temple, and on the map where you select the bird statue for the area, it's called the Forest Temple? Well, it's a simple answer, really. Just that the bird statue wasn't completely accurately named. It was literally, I mean, Skyview Temple, it's Skyview Temple, but it is a temple in the forest. It is a forest temple, so they just named the bird statue, its location or whatever, just something a little less direct than this is the Skyview Temple. It's by the temple in the forest, you know, that's all there is to it, really. Alright guys, that's for this time. Be sure to send your questions to the contact page in the description, and I'll see you guys later. Violet asks, Dear Fluffy... Violet asks, Dear Fluffy Beast, why do Highlands turn into... Fluffy, are you making a comment about my hair?